So the lesson's working its way back. The beginning of it, I asked you to look up some definitions, and hopefully some of you got the chance to do that. And the first one that I asked for you to look up was something called paranormal. Anybody find a definition for paranormal? Other than the new movie that's coming out? Okay, so I should stop sending out the lesson because nobody's doing it anyway. Somebody's got a definition, they just don't want to share it, I know. Go ahead, Dave.
There's a couple, but beyond normal explanation or scientific explanation. Supernatural phenomena, any occurrence that defies a normal, quote-unquote, rational explanation.
Right. So if you didn't hear that, it's anything outside of normal, what you could explain with normal science, or those kinds of things. Outside the normal is where paranormal comes from. And it refers to events and things that happen to people in places that seemingly can't be explained. What's a real easy one? UFOs. UFOs, very easy. A very easy example of paranormal. We see a light in the sky, or we see a light when we shouldn't see a light, or we see something we believe out there that's floating that we've never seen before, and the next thing you know, our minds go wild, and all the other folks with us, and the next thing you know, we have flying saucers, or we have well, we'll get to that in a second too. We have flying saucers, we have people from another planet, this whole UFO phenomenon breaks out. And I can tell you from the 2 times I've been around UFO events, both of them people swore were related to outer space, and it was zip to do with outer space. We were testing a couple of lasers. I can't go into the locations, but we were testing a couple of lasers. One of them, the farmers, when they found that out, then they decided, well, that was what explained the chickens weren't laying eggs, and we had sterilized all the chickens in a 100-mile radius. I mean, when people don't understand something, they have to. So they grab something. Things that people didn't understand 5,000 years ago that would have been called paranormal back then are quite normal today. Eclipse of the sun, anything like that. And then, yes, John was pointing out some other examples of paranormal. The monster that comes up out of the Loch Ness lake or sea or whatever the thing is. Sasquatch, people think they see something running through the woods, so now it's Sasquatch. And then, of course, I see all sorts of heads nodding over here. And then, of course, if you want to have fun with your neighbor and they believe in Sasquatch, what do? You create a big footprint and run out in the back of their house at night and stamp the big footprint down so they swear it's Sasquatch, right? So that's paranormal in general. And people do all kinds of tricks with paranormal, and you can get people who can bend forks and all this other stuff. It's just a trick. But that's what paranormal is, and it covers a lot of things. It's always associated in man's view with the demon possession. So let's talk about that a little bit more now. And I said the next thing I wanted you to look up was poltergeist. And probably you've all, if you're crazy enough to go to these goofball movies, seen Poltergeist. I can't say that I have. I had no desire. The whole fiction thing, I just can't do it.
Oh man, Craig T. Nelson.
We probably have a bunch of poltergeist experts in the class today. So what's a poltergeist? Yeah, speaking. Oh, we can't move on first without somebody asked me this morning, have I seen the coming preview for what movie? Paranorman. We are not taking our grandchildren to that. I just can't. Now, the Monster Hotel that comes later, maybe. So this stuff is all around us, and it's serious and humorous, but it's all worked into our culture. So the next one I asked for was poltergeist. So what do we get on poltergeist?
A spirit believed to manifest its presence by rapping or other noises, and also by acts of mischief, such as throwing furniture about. It's from a German, I guess. I
Can't even read his own writing.
Can't even read his own.
It's probably a possessed.
German word noisy, which is the geist part.
Yeah, so poltergeist, if you didn't hear John, poltergeist is something unseen that creates a lot of noise and activity, generally speaking. Typically, poltergeist, like you said, rapping, knocking, banging on walls, ceilings, pipes, that sort of thing. Furniture and other items move through time and space seemingly by themselves, most of the time in a violent fashion, I believe. I think poltergeists heave things a lot, I think, is what that's all about. It wouldn't be a scary movie if they didn't. Yeah, I don't know about fire. Could be. Burst of fire, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, if you're making a movie and you want to scare the tar out of people, you're going to come up with everything. I don't know that poltergeist is an alien coming out of the chest of the guy fighting him or not, but you have those too. But generally, poltergeists are bangy, noisy things. Of course, the lights are never on. And when they come on, things flash across the, that's generally what a poltergeist is these unexplained sounds, furniture moving on its own, that kind of thing. Well then, what's a ghost? That was the next term I asked you to look up.
Soul or spirit of a deceased person.
The soul or spirit of a deceased person. Ooh, I like that. What else? What else could we add to that?
On the location.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, they're assigned to a location. So this is, let's see, this is somebody who was murdered in a mansion 200 years ago, and they can't go to their rest in peace until somebody discovers who murdered him. So in the meantime, they haunt the house, and they can be seen at times and not at other times, rattling around in the house, and it scares everybody, and they move out. Or eventually, somebody comes along and solves the murder, and then the person can go rest in peace, and the ghost disappears. Or you call the Ghostbusters and they fill it full of marshmallow. But I mean, all kidding aside, this is the folklore around ghosts. Ghosts are tied to a location. Something's haunted, or a town is haunted, or a job is haunted. The hotel innkeeper, used to be here, now his spirit's in the hotel, and all this sort of thing. So they're typically tied to a location. And the foolishness about all of this is that dead is dead. Your spirit doesn't hang around because you're unhappy with how you died, or because of some unresolved conflict or something. Sorry, I know all the ladies love the movie Ghost. I'm married to one. I can't say anything bad about the movie.
You're the one that likes the movie.
I know, I can't say anything bad. Yeah, all the ladies are nodding. Yeah, it's a very romantic movie. And then, of course, in the end, he sees a light. I said this before, these near-death experiences. Nobody has a near-death experiences and sees a dark hole. Oh, I'm going to hell, but I'm not supposed to be there yet, so they sent me back for a while. Never hear that. You ever notice that? Doesn't matter what their faith or lack of faith or anything. Everybody sees a light. Everybody goes to heaven, and they say, no, it's not your time. Go on back.
It probably happens, but they just don't tell anybody.
Well, I guess that's true, too, yeah. Whew, I died, and wait till you hear where I'm going, Yeah, I don't know, you could probably sell a few books that way, though. So that's the ghost thing, is it's typically tied to a location and most often tied to some event at that location. So now we're going to talk about the real thing. Those are all fictional. You cannot find one piece of biblical doctrine to support either of those things. Period. You cannot find it. This is all man's invention to try and explain the unexplained, because they don't want to accept Christ and, if you will, the Christian or God's worldview. So if you're not going to accept that, then you've got to, there's surely life. God wouldn't, one of the things I hear a lot, God wouldn't have created this earth, this large universe full of galaxies, and all those billions and billions and billions of stars, and all of that, just for this little earth with just us little people on it. There's people somewhere else. Well, that's not what the Bible tells us whatsoever. What does the Bible tell us about the stars in the sky in relation to God and His glory? The heavens display His glory. And He tells us several places in the Bible that He's revealed through His creation. And if you were going to try and describe God and His glory and His infinite, His power, His wisdom and everything, the heavens would do that. That's why they're up there. They're not up there because there's a bunch of aliens living on all these other places who, oh, by the way, when we find them, are like light years ahead of us in intelligence, and yet the best they can do is fly around in something that looks like a lid off a tin can. Anyway, going way down the wrong road. Poltergeists and all this paranormal stuff are simply things people can't explain. They get blown out of proportion as folklore, fiction, whatever you want, even become another person's religion, if you will. Yeah, I won't go down that road. There are religions, I could name a couple of them, where one of the ways you progress through that religion is through levitation, for example. So stay away from that stuff. It's fiction. It's going to mislead you. It will confuse you. It will compromise your doctrine and your belief. Stay away from it. Because the real thing is 1,000 times worse. And we're going to talk about the real thing this morning. All right, so with that, let's have a look at the real thing. And the first question that I ask is, as far back as the early Egyptians, demons, if I can read this without my glasses, were seen in everything, and as the cause for all manner of disease and illness. By the time of Christ's earthly ministry, it was clear that people were beginning to understand the difference. Did people understand the difference between someone demon-possessed and, let's say, an epileptic? Or were they all seen as demon-possessed? And so who has Matthew 4:23 and 24?
I do. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread out all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them.
So did they know the difference? You bet they knew the difference. Let's read Luke 8:26 through 35.
They sailed to the region of Gerasenes, which is across the lake of Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met with a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in the house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell on his feet, shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of my Most High God? I beg of you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded a pure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it seized him, and though was chained to hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, "for many demons had gone into him." And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the
Abyss.
A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons had came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tended the pigs saw that had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside.
Yeah, they were terrified them.
And the people went out to see what had happened.
Yeah.
When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed with his right mind, and they were afraid.
Yeah, he was dressed and he had his right mind afterwards. So what these two verses, or two sets of verses, show us, first of all, they knew the difference. There is no reference in the New Testament anywhere that somebody brought a demon-possessed person to Christ and Christ said that person isn't demon-possessed, they're epileptic or they're whatever. All of the examples that were given in the Bible, clearly the person was demon-possessed. And in a few minutes we're going to talk about how you would know that. Also, what I liked about the Matthew passage is it shows you that they knew back then the difference between various things, including epilepsy, although I think it was referred to as something else when George read it, but the same thing. They knew the difference between someone who had a medical problem, a disease of some kind, and demon possession, because when you are confronted by demon possession, it is crystal clear. Trust me on that. We're going to talk about it a little bit here. The other thing I wanted you to see in the very probably well-known story of Christ and this demoniac, this demon-possessed person with the pigs and all that, is demon possession doesn't mean that a person has a single demon living in them. There are plenty of verses through the New Testament in particular that talk about more than one consuming an individual. And in this case, when Christ said, "What is your name?" He said, "My name is Legion." Christ knew what their name was. He wanted others to know that what was possessing this man wasn't a single demon, it was many. Now, in the Roman army, Legion meant 6,000. This isn't to tell us that there were 6,000 in there. We don't know. It was just their number was many. There are other demons where Christ talks about the only way you're going to cast those out is through prayer and fasting. And when we get to exorcism, we'll talk about that. There are all manner of demon possession in terms of whether it's one or many, and what they do to an individual when they possess that individual. But clearly the first thing I wanted to establish is that even back then, they knew the difference. And we'll talk about that some more as we go along. Now, the second question I asked was, what does Christ demonstrate in Matthew 12:22 through, is it 29? Yeah. I think I had through verse 30 on the lesson by mistake. It's okay if you read verse 30, it won't kill you. So what did Christ demonstrate in Matthew 12:22 through 29? So if someone has that to read.
Then a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute was brought to Jesus, and he healed him, so that the mute man spoke and saw. All the crowds were amazed and were saying, "This man cannot be the son of David, can he?" But when the Pharisees heard this, they said, "This man cast out demons only by Beelzebub, the ruler of demons." And knowing their thoughts, Jesus said to them, "Any kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and any city or house divided against itself will not stand. If Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself, and then will his kingdom stand. And I, by Beelzebub, cast out demons, for whom do your sons cast them out? For this reason they will be your judges. And if I cast out demons by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. For how can anyone enter the strong man's house and carry off his property unless he first binds the strong man, and then he will plunder his house? He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters."
Now, I want you to, before we answer the question, I want you to understand what's going on there. I think a lot of times we get confused. Thank you, George. A lot of this Beelzebub and Satan and, oh my goodness, back and forth, and then the strong man, and what on earth is going on here? Clearly we understand that they're accusing Christ of the only reason he can cast these demons out is he's one himself, that he works for Satan. And what Christ is saying is, well, wait a minute, think about that for a minute. If I worked for Satan, how am I helping Satan expand his empire by casting his demons out? I should be trying to find places for them to move in. So that's faulty logic. And then he goes on about the strong man's house. In fact, could I get you to read that last, I think it's like 2 verses. Read about the strong man's house again, and listen to this one more time.
For how could anyone enter the strong man's house and carry off his property unless he first binds the strong man, and then he will plunder his house? He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters.
So what does he mean when he says the strong man's house, and you have to bind the strong man before you can carry out his possessions? What is that? What's he talking about there?
Satan.
Satan what?
Satan's the strong man.
Satan is the strong man. That's correct. What did Christ come to do? He came to seek and save the lost. There's another verse, I could have put it in there, I forgot. The gates of hell are not going to prevail against the church. A lot of people think that verse, the gates of hell are not going to prevail against the church, mean that when hell somehow attacks the church, they won't prevail. And it's actually the reverse of that. We're meant to go down in there where the lost are and pull them out. And this is what Christ is talking about in this verse. I'm not Beelzebub and helping Beelzebub, and I'm the complete opposite. I'm here to bind him up so that I can go in there and get those possessions out of there. Very important distinction there. All right. My question was, what is Christ showing us in these verses? There are two things, actually. One you probably had never considered before, but there are two things he's showing us about demon possession in these verses. What might they be? Or even one thing. Or if you come up with three, that's allowed. What's Christ showing us about demon possession?
You have to overpower the demon to free someone.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. All right, I guess I'll help you a little bit here. The first thing is, go ahead. They're driven out in God's name. The first thing he's showing you is that he's the only one who can bind Satan and drive out these demons. You're not going to get demons driven out by any other power but Christ's. Satan isn't going to do it. That's what he's telling the Pharisees right now. Satan's not going to drive his own demons out of there. There's only one way they can be driven out, and that's through Christ. There's another thing he's showing us here. It's subtle perhaps, but it's black and white when you read it. Demons are real. We wouldn't even be having this discussion if Christ hadn't cast a single one out when he came back, or when he walked on the earth. The fact that Christ is casting demons out, and it's a major piece of his ministry, tells us they're real and not to be taken for granted. This isn't fiction. They're real. And the other thing it's showing us in these verses is the only way they're going to get cast out is through Christ. Correct. That is correct. It shows us that he's much more powerful than Satan and his forces.
Which would be something for people that would worship Satan and stuff like that to think about.
A good point as well. If you didn't hear John, he said that would be something you'd want people who worship Satan to begin to think about, is that if they think Satan's such hot stuff, Christ is way more powerful than that, has authority over him. And then so I said, what is the significance about Matthew 10, 7, and 8? So who has Matthew 10, 7, and 8?
Okay, this is Jesus talking to the 12 apostles. And proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. You receive without paying, give without pay.
So what's significant here in terms of our study today? What demons are real, but what's Christ doing here? Preparing for the kingdom of heaven. What's that? Telling you what to do. Okay, but what's exactly? Thank you. He's passing the authority he has over demons to us, to his followers, first to his apostles and then to the church. We have the same power Christ has when it comes to demons. Remember that. You know, I've been talking about it through the probably 11, now going on 12 weeks of the class. Satan cannot coerce you to do anything. And in fact, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world, 1 John 4:4. We have the power over Satan and the demons. This is certainly something to be respected. I would say not to be afraid of necessarily, but to be respected. But if you're confronted with that, know that Christ is living in you and that you have the power to deal with that. We have somebody coming in. But that's what the significance of this verse is. That's why I wanted you to read this. The same power that Christ had over Satan, we have as well. And you know, a lot more. Christ said to his apostles, you know, you guys can move mountains. Absolutely move mountains. You're going to be able to do things you hadn't even... There's miracles going to be done after he's called back to heaven that people hadn't even seen on the earth before through his church. We have immense power here and authority, and we need to be aware of it. So then the last question I asked was, when Christ drove out a demon... Oh, I love this question. When I came up with this question, I was patting myself on the back. When Christ drove out a demon, it was probably Satan patting me on the back, I suppose. When Christ drove out a demon or demons from a possessed person, exactly how did he do it? What special magic, potions, equipment, special prayers, or other rituals did he use? And what does this tell us about exorcism? And so let's read Mark 1:27. Who has that?
The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching, and with authority. He even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him."
Okay, and then Luke 4:40 and 41.
When the sun was setting, all those who had any that were sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And demons also came out of many, crying out and saying, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." And he, rebuking them, did not allow them to speak, for they knew that he was the Christ.
Yeah. So let's see. I think what Mark read said Christ got 2 pounds of eye of newt, some chicken beaks, and some pheasant feathers, I think, and boiled that all up into. No, that's right. No, he lit candles in 4 different corners of the room and then stood in the middle with the person. No, that wasn't it either. Oh, I know. He held the cross up, and that's what. Oh, and the rosary beads. That's right. Oop, and oh, no, wait. You forgot. He had to have garlic in his pocket first. Yeah. See, no, none of that stuff. Zero. How did Christ exorcise demons? That's correct. Yeah. And they knew it. I mean, what's fascinating about the demon-possessed, the demoniac, I can never pronounce that lake either, by the way, Gethsemane or wherever that place was. In any case, Lake George. When he spoke to that legion of demons, the first thing they said was, first of all, they recognized him. And that's the other thing. All the demon stories in the Bible, they recognize God, or they recognize Christ. And the next thing they recognize, you're Christ, and they were worried that he was going to do what? Well, torment them, but how? Throw them into the abyss. They knew there was a place for them to get punished, and it was the abyss, and that's where they were headed. That's really fascinating, first of all, that Satan and his forces are out there doing these things, but the demons know that they get caught, they can get thrown in the abyss. And it's apparently not a pleasant place, because they didn't want that. They'd rather go getting these pigs over here instead. And there's a whole nother, you can go down that road too. They jump in the pigs die. Well, that must free them up to go occupy somebody else, I'm guessing, as opposed to getting thrown in the abyss, which they can't come out from. But they recognized Christ right away. And there are several verses, and we'll hit this when we close the class today, about the demons recognizing Christ and recognizing people who aren't. So with that, I want somebody who has Acts 19:11 to 20. We are going to look at what I call fictitious exorcism, somebody's attempt at it. So that's Acts 19:11 through 20. Whoever has that.
God did extraordinary miracles through Paul, so that even handkerchiefs and aprons that had touched him were taken to the sick, and their illnesses were cured, and the evil spirits left them. Some Jews who went around driving out evil spirits tried to invoke the name of the Lord Jesus over those who were demon-possessed. They would say, "In the name of Jesus, whom Paul preaches, I command you to come out." 7 sons of Sceva, a Jewish chief priest, were doing this. One day the evil spirit answered them, "Jesus, I know, and I know about Paul, but who are you?" Then the man who had the evil spirit jumped on them and overpowered them all. He gave them such a beating that they ran out of the house naked and bleeding. When this became known to the Jews and Greeks living in Ephesus, they were all seized with fear, and the name of the Lord Jesus was held in high honor. Many of those who believed now came and openly confessed their evil deeds. A number who had practiced sorcery brought their scrolls together and burned them publicly. When they calculated the value of the scrolls, the total came to 50,000 drachmas. In this way, the word of the Lord spread widely and grew in power.
Yeah. So I would venture to say, first of all, if you're not an honest Christian, don't go chasing after demons. Probably not a cool thing. They clearly know the difference between someone whose Christ is living in and not. And we also need to be careful of people who go around claiming they have this gift. I've forgotten the person's name now, but you'll recall that I think it was after Paul cast out the demon in the fortune-telling woman, a Jew came up to him and wanted to know how much he would charge him to give him the same gift, because he was going to go make money with it. Do people do that today? Oh my goodness. The charlatans are everywhere. And oh my goodness. And let me tell you, along with the Christian charlatans, there's the whole 800 number stuff you can get into. Be very, very careful. So I wanted to ask the class, I gave you a heads up a couple weeks before. I'd be interested if any of you have had an experience with a demon-possessed person and would share that with us this morning. Anybody at all? Has anybody come across this before? And no, I don't mean your boss is demon-possessed or any of that sort of thing. Ex-wives don't count. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, bad. The dog that bit you next door, that's not going to work either. Anybody had an experience? See, part of the problem is we live a protected life as Christians, and we don't experience these things. At least most of us. And so when you do, because I'm going to share two with you this morning, you will recognize it immediately. Just as the apostles did in the time of Christ, there is no mistaking a demon-possessed person. And then we want to look, we're probably going to run over a little, but then we want to look at some of the things that will tell us what demon possession really, how you can spot it. Although, again, so let me share two stories with you, spread over a long period of time, or a period of time between the two. Sherry and I, new Christians, together, basically, like other couples, and struggling with a lot of things. I mean, I'll share just a little background with Sherry and I. She was very active and very devout Catholic when we met at the tender age of 16 and fell in love the first time we met. And I was just as active as, in those days, I guess you would have called us a Northern Baptist. The Southern Baptist didn't dance, so we belonged to the Northern Baptist. Had to have that dance. Yeah, I know, yeah. Can't draw, can't dance. Horrible. Just drives Sherry crazy. I played some musical instruments when I was younger, one of which was drums, and I played in a band. She'd come and hear the performances each night, but was blown away by the fact I could play real good, but couldn't dance one step. In any case, so I was pretty active as a kid. I drove my teachers crazy. I've told you this before, because I'd go into Sunday school and, well, Johnny, what does that mean to you? And I'd say, I don't know what it means. What does it mean? And then I'd get this, well, there's no real answer here. It's really how it, and it just drove me crazy as a kid. But so I was very active as a Baptist. Sherry's very active as a Catholic. And in those days, this is in the 60s, this was a big no-no. There was a Catholic part of town and the Protestant part of town. And the Catholics, she wasn't even allowed really to look at the church building as we drove past it. I mean, they were just forbidden from any association with the Protestant church whatsoever. And frankly, the Baptists didn't care for the Catholics all that much in terms of socializing with them. And when I first came home and told my folks I'd fallen in love with a Catholic girl, it was like, oh. It turned out my mom and Sherry were just as close as her own mother in the end, but it was a completely different environment. Well, fast forward from there, I don't know, probably we were married 7 or 8 years, I guess, at this point. And Sherry accepted Christ and came over to be a Baptist. And by then, I was attending a Southern Baptist church, little tiny thing in Minnesota, when I finally said, my way's not working. And I had given my life to Christ when I was 12 or 13, but still it was my way. And when I hit 30, I said, this isn't working. There's got to be a better way. And I remember to this day, just turning my entire life over to Christ, completely, everything, which is a little scary, frankly, because now suddenly, how do you make a decision and that sort of thing? And so we were kind of struggling a little, and between the faith, Sherry had difficulty with the pregnancy, there was a lot going on in our lives, and then right in the middle of all of it, the Lord rips us out of our roots in Minnesota and plants us in this little place called Maui, Hawaii, which we'd never even heard of. And we begin in a little local Baptist church up there, and the Lord's just pouring knowledge into us. And we start having, because what I learned from Sherry was that not everybody is raised memorizing the books of the Bible. And not everybody knows what an angel is, and so on and so on. Yeah, we assume all this stuff. So we began a home Bible study, and we took, I don't know, 3 months, and just looked at simple things that outsiders don't understand. Where'd the red letters come from in the Bible, and what's an angel, and all these just different things. Meanwhile, I'm teaching a class at that church of senior adults, of all things. What a bizarre thing the Lord did there. I never taught Sunday school in my life, and my first class is senior adults. But the body of that church was just on fire for God. It was just incredible. Little tiny church and just super people. And we made friends with a couple of them. I'm not going to put their names on here, but we made friends with a couple of them. And we began what today is called a small group. And plus we had Sunday school. It was incredible. Oh, yeah, and by the way, we prayed and worshiped on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights too, but I won't go there. So we started this small group. So we were having our home Bible study, and that one was the community. We'd get our neighbors to come, all these Hawaiians and such. It was quite the experience. And then one night a week, we went over to this couple's house or other people in the group. We kind of rotated around. We all had kids, and you know how all that is with a small group. They had a friend who was really struggling in his faith and struggling with a lot of things. We didn't know him. He didn't come to our church, but he would come to this small group thing in somebody's home. We happened to be in their home this evening. Said very little. He was always quite quiet and kept to himself other than he would talk to this couple. And you could tell there was something really, 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 I don't know, challenging, bothering. I don't know what he just wasn't there. I don't know. Anyway. But in the study, he was faithful. He had his Bible. He was there every week and wouldn't hardly say a word, but he'd be there. I don't even remember what I was teaching. In an instant, this quiet little person leaped into the air and into my face and looked like the size of the entire room we were in. I mean, he just got huge in front of me. It was, oh. And at first, I thought he was angry or, I didn't know. I mean, just out of nowhere. His mouth opened up, and I have never heard that voice ever. And what came out of him was about Christ and how it was something about who was I to tell him that he didn't know Christ or something like that. But I wasn't telling him he didn't know Christ. That was what was odd about it, is the conversation he was trying to have with conversation. Whew, that's a bad word too. But the screaming that was coming out of him had really nothing to do with anything I'd been saying to him. And it was almost maybe an internal thing he was having. I don't know. But it was all about Christ and at me. And who was I to proclaim the gospel? And who was I to be teaching these people about Christ? And it was just challenging. What you can't describe this voice. You just can't. It's just this different, odd, and very powerful. Very powerful. And I've been teaching for about a year at that point. You're like, wow, how do you react to this? He was out the house that quick. I mean, that came out of his mouth, and probably in 30 seconds, gone. That fast. Whew! And we all weren't sure what happened, and we prayed a lot about it. Because I didn't know demon possession from anything at that point. Yeah, they had no. This was so. A couple weeks go by, month, I don't know. He comes up in the news on another island in Honolulu, going naked, running down the middle of the aisle of a church worship service in Honolulu. And the police have to come and restrain him and haul him out of there. And the same thing, all this profanity at the church and all these things, haul him out. Obviously, I'm thinking the guy's off his rocker or something. A couple of weeks later, maybe 6 months, I don't know. We'd forgotten about it again. Now he goes screaming naked through the cemetery in Diamond Head. I don't know if you've all been over to Diamond Head or not, and is gunned down by the police. He had gotten so violent and was, obviously something was wrong. And the more we thought about it over the years, it was obviously a demon-possessed person, just clear as day. So, had that experience. Thank you, Lord. Don't need that again. We're good now. And no, I know, but I'm just saying we just kind of want to put it behind us. Didn't dwell on it a lot, any of that. And this was in 1980 and 1981. Fast forward now very quickly to 1993. I'm in seminary, although that had absolutely nothing to do with this, but we're living in Albuquerque. I'm in seminary. And National Day of Prayer comes. I believe it's in May, I think, isn't it? Yeah. National Day of Prayer comes, and a call goes out through the churches and the seminary where I was at. The city of Albuquerque wanted the Day of Prayer to be hosted on this giant plaza in front of their government buildings. Lots of problems back then. Needed to pray for the state and local government right there in the city of Albuquerque. And this was encouraged by some of the senior administrative people in the government in the city. And big campaign to get lots of people out, and a lot of us went out. And you show up on this huge plaza. I don't know how many people were there. It could have been 1,500, could have been 500. I honestly don't know. There were so many and they had a stage set up on the steps. And you'd call it a praise band today, I guess, there. And several pastors and music leaders from across the city had come together as a team to lead us in this. And it was very well organized, extremely well organized. And they had groups break off into these giant circles of about probably 35 to 50 people in a circle. And we just filled this plaza with these circles. And then they're kind of typical of a National Day of Prayer. I think we started praying for the president or something, and then they worked down this list of prayer requests. And we'd have some music, sing some praises, read some scripture, and then we'd pray. And they basically allotted time for each group to pray. It wasn't necessarily you'd get to pray around the whole circle. There was too many of us for that, but maybe 10, 15-minute spots. And you'd pray, and then as you were praying, you'd hear the music slowly, quietly begin to play again. You knew it was time to wrap that section up, and so on. And I'm thinking this is really cool. And the fact that the city government was endorsing it and a lot of them were there praying with us, I thought this is cool. Right in the middle of one of the prayers, that same voice that I heard, now it's not the same, I'm not saying that, but the very similar voice that I heard coming out of this guy in the 70s, I heard distinctly, and so did everybody in that plaza. And what are you praying to God for? He is never going to answer your prayer. Look at how evil you people are. God has no time for you. And all this stuff, just filth, just coming out of this person's mouth. And you could just sense, we were in prayer. You could just sense everybody. We're praying, but what is that? You want to turn and have a look, that kind of thing. And it just kept up, and it was covering the whole plaza. And then the music came up, and we stopped praying, thinking, well, that'll do it. That whoever's doing that will go away or something. It just kept up. It was just a torrent of the city is evil and all this filth anyway. And the worship leader said, obviously, we need to pray, and we need to pray that Christ will come and chase this demon away. And we began to pray. And I have to admit that before we began to pray, I looked to where this voice is coming from. And it was a little tiny lady. You would have never spotted her in a crowd. I mean, very plainly dressed, quiet-looking little lady who was circling the plaza. It was like an arc, because you couldn't get around the building. Circling the arc. And she wasn't running. She was just walking. But that voice was carrying across that whole plaza. It was incredible, and it was unmistakable. Not her voice, not at all. And boy, it was amazing the prayer that came about during that time. Because let me tell you what being around someone who's demon-possessed does to your faith. It validates it immediately. you suddenly realize this stuff is real. And prayer is real, and we need Christ right this second. You see how that changes your prayer life? Incredible. Oh my goodness, I could have stayed there all day. And it was clear to us that if Satan has organized things such that there's one demon's the prince of Persia and so on, one was over the city of Albuquerque, and he was there that day and was not happy about the day of prayer at all, and did his best to stop us from praying and did not succeed, and Christ drove him off. Very real, unmistakable to every single person that was there. That's enough experiences for me, Lord. I've grown plenty now, thank you. I don't need any more. But I wanted to share those two with you this morning. I think part of the challenge as Christians is we don't experience a lot of the things the Bible talks about, and so we have to take them on faith, which we should. That's fine. But when you experience one of the things that the Bible talks about in there, whether it's God giving you some kind of revelation or you actually hearing God's voice, and that happened once as well, it adds a depth, a solidness to your faith that is just, you become, I don't know about unshakable. God knows at what point I would shake. I'm not going there, but it really strengthens your faith. These things are real. This whole demon possession thing is not something to take lightly. It's not a bunch of junk getting thrown around a room, floating and all that jazz. And it isn't something that some silly crucifix is going to drive away and that sort of thing. And you will realize that instantly if you are ever confronted with a demon-possessed person. This is why, even when Christ was walking the earth, there was no mistaking that the person was demon-possessed, because they are so completely different from anything else. Completely different. It's unmistakable.
But the Catholic Church does have, like, priests that specialize in exorcism, right?
Yeah, they'll also come and bless your house too, but I don't know that that's necessarily required.
I don't know either, but I'm just saying most people like you or anybody wouldn't know how to react in a situation where you have someone that's demon-possessed. You had this guy in Hawaii who bounced from island to island and ended up, getting shot. I mean,
Yeah.
who's to say, if God, Christ gave people the power to exorcise demons, maybe a priest had gotten a hold of that person, may have been able
Yeah, perhaps, and we don't know. I mean, that's the other, just like a demon, one of the things that's interesting about demon possession is that it's all over the New Testament. Oh, in fact, before we get ready to dismiss, it's all over the New Testament. You don't hear about it much today other than what Ron's alluding to. The other thing, so what strikes you is when Christ walked can you imagine for just a second, you're Christ and you have the power to heal everybody? But he didn't heal everybody. And he didn't drive out every demon. And, what demons get driven out and what don't? There's a parable in the Bible where Christ talks about the guy who was demon-possessed, cleaned up his house. You remember this parable? And then more demons, worse than the ones before, came back in. The problem is folks don't want to accept the truth. They don't want Christ. They want something else. And they go searching for it, and then when they find it, it's too late. I'd love to say that there's a way to drive out every demon possession that we have, but that's not the answer. The real answer is they want Christ in their life. And in fact, a couple of the demon possession ones I believe we had today, the person who's then dressed and clean goes out witnessing about this is the Messiah, this is Christ. Not every demon-possessed person wants to accept Christ. So that's another challenge that we have. I'll be with you in just 1 second. I found this on the internet, so warning, but I've looked up the verses. I think they're fine. This is actually out of a Wikipedia page. This is every scripture in the New Testament that talks about demon possession. Demons and demon possession. So I'll send that around. Let's see, we'll go about one over here, and then I'll let somebody have the rest of these the other way. Send that around. It's a world we don't understand. I wouldn't criticize the Catholics any more than I would anyone else. My caution is avoid it if at all possible. And if Christ brings it into your life, know that he's bringing it into your life for a reason. Trust him and depend on your faith and the Word of God. That's what gets rid of the demon. or at least will get them out of your way. Last questions before we dismiss. Yeah.
Yeah, I was worried about, say for example, just like what you were just talking about just a moment ago, I was worried about people with mental disorders, for example, like people with schizophrenia or something like that, like where they become one person and then.
Yeah, there's multiple personality people, and yeah. But these are medical conditions,
Or any
right?
other kind of mental disorders.
Right.
Is that demon possession also?
No, it's just a medical condition.
It's just a medical
Yeah.
condition?
Yeah, demon possession is a person healthy, and then the demon comes in and takes over their body.
You know, I mean, sometimes I have this type of problem, you know, like you're saying, because I have like paranoid schizophrenia, you know, sometimes when I get like emotional, sometimes I have this type of problems, like emotional, like hearing voices or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And you know, sometimes, you know, sometimes I get real angry,
Sure.
you know, and
Plus, it must be a little frustrating as well.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes I be having like a little flashback or something like that. You know what I mean? It just bothers me. Or sometimes when someone says something to me and I feel it was kind of negative, I feel emotional and I get real angry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Well, all of us have anger issues, whether we want to admit it or not. And a good example I point to in the Bible, whenever this comes up, Cain was not demon-possessed when he killed Abel. Was not. He was mad, and God said, listen, sin's at your door, he was to be held accountable, to manage his anger, and he didn't. And he killed Abel, and as a result of that, of course, Cain was punished for that. But Cain wasn't demon-possessed. He was just mad. And he was mad for all the kinds of reasons we get mad. He was jealous of his brother. He wanted God to love him the way he loved Abel. He wanted the same relationship. But in another respect, he didn't want to do the things Abel was doing. And so he was frustrated. He was tormented, twisted around, whatever you want to say about it. And he got so mad that he finally killed his brother. But that's not demon possession. That's us not being able to control our, being disciplined about our emotions. So on that fine note, on this gray, windy, rainy day, thanks again for being so faithful over 12 weeks. We will take a break next week, and then the following week, we're going to study living the Christian life and look at all sorts of neat things from meditation and fasting, and boy, won't that be fun? Maybe we'll even do some foot washing. Who knows, You never know in my class. But we'll watch it there, lady. But we'll be meeting in the big youth room, I believe, at the other end of the hall for that one. And that'll be a 12-week thing that will run through 1 December, and then we'll take December off and start again in January. So more than welcome to be with us again. It'll be 11 o'clock then. We're going to start our 2-service thing after Labor Day. And unless there's a question, let's stand. We'll be dismissed this morning.